Thank you. We'd look to move through some of the more administrative stuff. We've got no other apologies. Any late items? No, that's great. We've got a fairly full agenda. Any conflicts of interest to be declared? No. Let's move then to confirmation of the minutes from the previous meeting. Does anyone have anything that they would like to add or have changed to those minutes? Councillor.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it was just on page, page 10. And this was under the item 81, health, safety and wellbeing quarterly. You'd asked for an update on a number of contractors who've completed the pre-work in the next HSW quarter. So have we got those?
I think that Noah attempts to deal with that in his paper. So maybe we'll get to his paper and then we'll see whether you think he's answered that question.
Okay, thank you. And on page 11, you asked if Dave Robson could attend the meeting. Has he been invited?
I understood he is turning up.
No, there was, I guess, I contacted him last week to say that we were at in terms of that quarterly risk report and risk policy and risk framework. It would have been, we've done a considerable amount of work inside and makes the leadership team, and so it probably be best left for him to attend the next meeting.
Okay, so that's a surprise, but that's okay. We are going to consider the risk management policy. So I'm sure Graham will be able to deal with questions arising from that.
Yeah, I guess what happened, Councillor Jeffries, is that David wasn't involved with the preparation of that. So to get him here to speak to that, we did that internally.
Any other questions, Councillor? Great. On that basis, I'll move that the minutes of the last meeting be confirmed, and that'll be seconded by Councillor Jeffries. Okay, let's move on then to the agenda for this meeting. And the first item is a decision report. Brendan, good morning, welcome. This is in relation to the audit.
Yes, that's correct.
This is the audit of the 24-25 annual report, including the audit plan. There are three appendices, yes, which we've all had a chance to, I'm going to assume we've all had a chance to read: the audit engagement letter from Deloitte, the audit proposal letter from Deloitte, and the audit plan from Deloitte. And the recommendation is that the committee authorise the mayor to sign the engagement letter, the audit proposal letter, and that we receive the audit plan. Bruno, thank you for joining us. Please feel free to sit next to Brendan. Brendan, before we get into any remarks that Bruno would like to make, and I'm very grateful to Bruno for giving me some time. A month or so ago, we had a general conversation about audit and life. Are there any things, Brendan, that you wanted to the committee specifically to note before we get into Bruno and then questions?
Nothing in particular. I guess I will point out the proposal letter. So that covers a period for this year and then the following 3 years. One thing I did point out when this came through from Deloitte, and Ben, who's the manager on the job, spoke for related to that, is that obviously with the 28 financial year, there's going to be changes with what's happening in the three water space. Depending on the decision the council finally makes, either we won't be doing some of the water or we'll be doing it, but it'll be a separate engagement. So while this proposal does have an audit fee in for that year, as we get close to that time, things have crystallised, I guess, as to what we're happening. That'll probably get redone at that time.
That's a fair point. You're really saying that the scope of the operation of the organisation is going to be audited may in fact change materially.
Absolutely.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, so that will obviously potentially have an impact on the audit fee.
Thanks, Brendan. Is there anything else that you wanted to note? Any comment in terms of what's being put forward? My sense was, I think I've seen about 30 years of this, so it looked fairly standard to me. Was there anything in particular that stood out that you thought was really important for members to understand?
No, not really. I mean, in terms of the plan, it's like you say, it's really standard. There was nothing significant that came out in the area of focus that I wasn't expecting. I mean, it's all pretty much the same stuff as last year.
Right. Okay. All right. Before we get to questions from colleagues, Bruno, welcome. It's great to have you along. I really appreciate you making time to be with us. Is there anything in particular, Bruno, before we get into questions either for you or for Brendan, that you thought it would be useful to pick out for members?
Right. Thank you, Peter, and good to see you all again, and good to be back at Ōtorohanga District Council again. It feels like coming back to old friends, a lot of familiar faces. I think probably just adding on the point with the engagement letters, you would have seen the last few years, the audit proposals were just 1 year at a time. I think before COVID, we used to do 3-year proposals, and through COVID, the Auditor General decided to just go on to annual proposals given the inflationary environment and potential impacts of COVID. But now they're trying to go back to the 3-year letters, but they also want to align with the 3-year letters with the audit 3-year contracts. That's why you've landed up with the anomaly this year of a 4-year letter. But as Brendan said, if the scope changes, we will relook at that and change the hours and fees accordingly, so don't have to worry about that. The only other thing I point out there, the area of focus is one of the areas we always look at is the valuation of assets, and this year it'll be the rating assets that are revalued. And I think what we usually say is the assets that aren't valued, there needs to be an assessment by council, the audit committee, whether there has been a material movement, and I see that's the next agenda item, so Brendan's way ahead of me, as you know. But other than that, look, I'm happy to take any questions. It is quite a standard audit plan for councils.
Great. Thanks, Bruno. Colleagues, any questions for either Bruno or Brendan?
I just had one around the materiality, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered, has that altered at all since the last audit?
But it will be on the same basis. It's usually 3% of expenditure. So as your expenditure goes up, the materiality level moves up.
Yeah, so it would have gone up then, obviously, last time. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, on that basis, then I will put the recommendations A, B, and C on page 16 of the papers, and that'll be seconded by Councillor Hughes. Everyone comfortable? Excellent. All right. Thank you, Bruno, and thank you, Brendan. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Bruno, you're more than welcome to stay as we move on to the riveting topic of fair value versus carrying value assessments. Great. Good morning. Are you okay? Hopefully not a health and safety problem. Oh, that's it. So, Kathy, what we've done is we've gone through the administrative stuff. We've confirmed the minutes. We've just recommended that His Worship sign the engagement letter and audit proposal letter for the audits. And we've received the audit plan. We just heard from Brendan and Bruno, and now we're moving on. I know you'll be delighted to hear a conversation about fair value versus carrying value assessments. I know you wouldn't want to miss that one. So the recommendation is that we agree that the carrying values of the council's land and buildings and three water infrastructures are not materially different from the fair value of those assets. I really just have one question on that, Brendan, but before I get to that, is there anything in particular that you wanted to particularly draw to our attention? I appreciate, even for a non-accountant, you've been quite methodical in terms of the way you've moved through the assessment, so I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that you wanted to draw to our attention?
I guess the one thing that I possibly should talk about, we are using March 2025 adjusters, obviously, because June ones probably won't be out until August. I'm not expecting that if we were to redo this with June figures, that there would be a significant movement. I'm not seeing anything in the market that's indicating that inflation is suddenly going to jump up to 10% this quarter. So I think what we're accepting here today wouldn't be materially different from what it would be if I was to recalculate this using June adjusters.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to note? That is the methodology that you've used. You've applied the Statistics New Zealand business price indices.
Yes.
Explain what that is. Please explain what that is, because I've never heard of it. And secondly, why you've used.
New Zealand does a lot of indices, obviously. Most people are aware of the Consumer Price Index, which is known as inflation usually. The business indexes, there's various different ones of these as well. So the one that we usually use is the Capital Goods Price Index or Producer Index. I can't remember what the P stands for off the top of my head. And so that's looking at things like water systems, road construction, buildings, farm construction, fencing, all sorts of things that are more business related. So while CPI is good for the regular consumer, the problem is the basket of goods that makes up CPI is things like food. It does include rates. It includes rent. It includes a lot of things that councils and a lot of businesses don't actually buy themselves. So when people try to say, well, why are you using inflation? Well, that's inflation on things that we don't buy. So therefore, what we buy changes at different rates.
Yes.
And so that's where the business indices come in, and that's where the capital goods producers index comes in, and why we use that one, because that relates more to water systems, particularly for water. For the land and buildings, I've obviously used some information from QB around what land sales are happening in our area and what the movement in values are for that, as opposed to, because obviously land, you're not building land. Land exists. And if the buildings, I've used the the capital goods price index for construction costs as well for that.
So you've used, so where I got confused was you talked about a business price indices.
Yeah.
And I'd assumed that was an index, but what you're saying is you've actually used different indices depending on which assets you're looking at.
Yeah. So it's a sub indices within that. So the business price, it's you Google business price and it comes up, and it says it's called capital goods price. So they use different names in the stats website.
Yeah.
Which is probably not helping the confusion. But yeah, when you go into it, then within that it has different indices for, say, water systems, for construction costs, for road construction, various different things. So I've used the specific indices that best relates to, and even within a group of assets, for example, like with drinking water, I've used the water systems for pipes, pumps, that sort of stuff. But in the buildings we have, like our treatment plant and all our pump stations, the building construction costs index within that to make sure it matches more to the actual where the inflation is happening for those costs.
Okay, so in order to satisfy the auditors, you've only got to do two things right. One, you've got to be able to use a calculator properly in order to be able to calculate the number, and we can assume as the head of finance, you absolutely can do that. And then secondly, you need to have chosen the right index.
Yeah.
Have there been conversations with the auditors about making sure that they're comfortable that that's the index that you should use?
Not this year, but it's similar indexes to what we've used in previous years.
Right.
So I've used the assumption, and admittedly, yes, I probably should talk to Bruno about it, because there are no changes in the stats methodology, that those indices.
So you're satisfied that the methodology should be, so long as it's been executed correctly, should be, the auditor should be comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Brendan, I just need some clarification around the ownership of the rural water scheme assets. How is that all factored in here? Because technically council don't own them, do they themselves?
So all the rural scheme assets sit within our asset register. So we treat them as if we own them from because I guess there isn't an entity for each. There's a committee that looks after each of the rural schemes, but they're not a legal entity, I guess. So they don't own the assets in that respect. So we treat them as if we own on our fixed asset register.
Okay, so that's the reason they're included in this fair value. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Also, rural water in this case also includes Kāwhia. So the community water is just Ōtorohanga Township, and then Kāwhia is included. That's just due to the size of how many consumers have been helped or serviced with the water.
Councillor Jennings.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Brendan, clause 4.4. You say that you engaged Aon to undertake peer review of evaluation of rating, but I find that quite intriguing because they're insurance brokers, aren't they?
They also have a valuation branch.
Okay.
Yep. So it was actually David Robson who put forward that they could potentially do it.
Right.
We went to them, got a proposal from them, came back. It was slightly cheaper. Our peer review last year with a different provider. So we thought, yep, that was good. They're the qualifications they checked out for people doing it. So
that solves that one. Thank you. And 4.28, you've got a table there. We talk about systems for water and sewage and so on, and the movements there. Just a general question, will there be a full valuation of our water assets prior to them transferring to the new water entity?
if you were to go down the transfer of the assets, so water in the 3 year, because we do a 3 year cycle.
Yep.
Under the 3 year cycle is scheduled to be done at the end of the next financial year, so June 26. If council makes the decision to go with transferring the assets to the CCO, I guess that is part of the discussion that'll happen within the CCO as to do they want a valuation done for the assets transfer, because it will be within a 12-month period. They may not want another one done, in which case we obviously won't do it. I guess the other question around that should be who's going to pay for that, because if within our 3 year cycle we wouldn't do it ourselves, would the entity pay for that if they required one? So yes, there will be a valuation before the assets transfer over if we go down that path. It might not be at 30th of June 2027 at this point, so we don't know for sure what will happen there, but we will definitely do one at least next year.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked that is I'd be loath to see the assets going across to the entity if they're not at current valuation.
Yeah.
They could be getting them cheap. You know what I mean? So I just want to make sure that that we're getting there's bang for your buck. That's all.
Good news is that you will be a part owner of the entity.
Yeah.
But the point you make is a good one.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from colleagues? Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you, Brendan. I'm going to put the recommendation that we agree that carrying values for the assets are not materially different from the fair value of those assets based on the assessment and calculations that Brendan has provided, and that'll be seconded by his worship. Everyone comfortable with that? Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next item, which is, I think, quite a number of policies for review. First of all, as I understand it, Brendan, all changes have been marked up.
Yes.
And I really appreciate that. Thank you. It makes reading it a heck of a lot easier. The second thing that I've noticed is that there were no material changes. There were some changes, but none that I would regard as material. Would that be fair?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. And then just before we get to colleagues' questions, the one question I had was, we've got both a gifts policy and a koha policy.
Yes.
Can you think of any circumstances where koha would be appropriate, where a gift would not?
I mean, tangi would probably be the first thing that pops into my head.
Right.
hardly call a gift at a time it would seem weird. That's the main one that comes to me. Not too sure about this.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand.
But well, I don't have anything to add.
Good. Okay, that's good. Colleagues, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Brendan, just a question around professional membership, or just a clarification of what, do you have an example of what a personal membership would be?
So a personal membership, I'm a good example of that. So I'm a member of the Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand. And so that's personal to me, in that I am a member. It's not a membership, the council. Yeah, I'm not a membership as a council, because I am a chartered accountant, an associate chartered accountant. But council gets the benefit of me being a member, so that's why they reimburse me the cost of that.
Okay, no, that's cool. Yeah, I just wasn't quite sure that is it quite a wide field for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably us, and being Graham, myself, being the accountants. Engineering can have personal ones as well. So engineers, planners, yeah, they've got institutes they can be part of as well. Building, I don't think does. That's a council based. I don't know if HR has something. So there's various different professional bodies will have.
Thanks for that. Just a clarification on what that involves. Thank you.
But in most of those cases, council use it, they effectively protect the council. As well. So, for example, if you're a member of the New Zealand Chartered Accountants Association, you can in this case abroad here, then you're up in front of the board as well, restricted your membership. So it does protect the council a bit. Right, but the same with professional engineers. It's a very good point. Thanks. It's great.
Yeah, and as part of that membership, we have to do ethics training every year as well. So there's lots of stuff, benefits to council, us knowing about good ethics.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffries.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, on page 48, Brendan, it's the cohort policy under scope. But me, just the first sentence there says cohort a gift that is given unconditionally without any expectation on the part of the receiver. I can understand sort of where that's coming from, but I wonder whether we actually could have the full stop straight after unconditionally, because I was looking at the difference between a cohort and a donation, which is pretty much covered in your definitions on page 51 anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you go to a marae and you give a cohort $100 or $200, I would put it to you that there is a little bit of an expectation, like me or what. So I just wondered whether having that second part of the sentence was actually needed. That's all, and I'm quite happy to talk about that. But
Yeah, I guess I will point out that Cassidy was involved in actually writing this policy, not me. So it's probably more a question that he would probably answer better.
I'm happy to leave it at that.
Unless Tanya had something she wanted to.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I am completely comfortable with that sentence. I think yes, generally, as part of the occasion, whatever it might be, there is the kai that is associated, but I don't think that is an expectation that would be provided. In actual fact, I have been to some hui where there hasn't been, so, and we've still made it koha. So yeah, I am comfortable with it, Councillor Jeffries.
Thanks, Tanya.
That's fine. Thanks. On page 58, then under the staff purchasing policy. Yes, just wondered, the second bullet point there, all assets identified for the disposal to staff shall be valued, but is that independently valued or is it done in-house?
Yeah, so the bulk of the assets that we're disposing of in this manner is usually surplus vehicles. Someone replace a council vehicle. So we get an independent auctioneer or vehicle auctioneer down to give us what they think the value is worth, and then we use that as a basis to go out to staff or tender. We put a bit on top of what they've suggested. If no one gets a tender or no one tenders for it, then they would be the ones that they then buy it for them. So they're effectively guaranteed that they'll buy it for that price.
Good, okay, thank you.
For other things like IT and stuff, not independently, but usually that's such low value that Billy is pretty low deals with. And so we're usually getting rid of that. It's over, it's fully depreciated.
That answers that, thank you. And on the next page, 59, private use of council suppliers. The very first sentence there again, the question is, do staff purchases of goods and services at discounted prices, does that trigger fringe benefit tax?
Potentially, yes. If I remember my tax, my last tax, when we talk about this training, it depends on whether if the discount is sort of similar to what someone else would be able to get outside of getting it through council, then there's no FBT on it.
Yep, fair enough.
But if the discount is quite substantial compared to what you can get yourself, yes, there is potentially FBT.
Right.
Yeah.
So the council pays that?
If it's identified, admittedly, we don't have many people that actually use this that we're aware of now. And I guess that becomes the issue if there are FBT considerations, it's how it's council made aware of that because we don't get information from suppliers to say we're using it. But it only be if staff to tell us that we're using.
Good, okay, well, as long as there's a process in place, that's good, thank you. And just one last one on page 69, under meals and incidentals.
Yes.
The very last sentence in that first paragraph says non-alcoholic beverages may also be included as part of meal costs.
Yeah.
Which is great, no problems with that, but I just wondered, I mean, just say if it was me and I was in that, what's to stop me from having half a dozen zero stubbies, which would probably cost $60 potentially, as opposed to having a glass of wine for $10. I just wondered what the logic of that was, that's all.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And in this day and age where we have a lot of people downing zero alcohol beers and that sort of thing, I wonder whether we couldn't amend that to say, for clarity, zero alcohol beers or that are classed as alcohol, because they are the same price.
Yes, yeah.
You know, it's $10 for a tiny, and it's $4 for a Coke. So I think I would be really concerned, and I'd be even more concerned if one of my staff signed that off on an expense claim, quite frankly. So that, yeah, is a really good point. So I wonder if we shouldn't clarify that.
I guess the other clarification would be, was part of your point also the fact that I could buy, even if I was buying a Coke, say, I could buy 26 Cokes.
Yeah.
Yes, there's no limits.
That's right.
Yeah, so we probably need to reword it slightly to put it some sort of limit, but not specified limit.
I'm actually, through you, Chair, I'm actually okay with that because it's in the reasonable test.
Sure.
The other one is around alcohol.
Yeah.
Like when I purchased Garage Project Tiny or whatever it is at the supermarket, I still have someone coming over to check my age.
That's right. Yeah.
They are, because I look young. So it's kind of counted as the same, even though it's zero. So the Coke one, I would expect Graham to be saying, Brendan, 26 Cokes in a night. That's not great. We'll pay for one or two.
All right.
Oh, no, good on you. I'm just
Okay, so what I would propose then is in the definitions further down, do you have definitions? Yes, I do. I will put a definition of non-alcoholic beverages that states that something along the lines of non-alcoholic beverages is any beverage that has zero alcohol in it, excluding zero alcohol beer, wine. Yeah. We'll put some wording together whether you want to. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so subject to the change to was that the travel and accommodation policy we were just talking about? Brendan?
Yes, true.
Okay, so subject to the change to the travel and accommodation policy, which picks up the non-alcohol point. I will move that the policies that are outlined be adopted, and that's seconded by Councillor Jeffries. Excellent. Well done, Brendan. Thank you. And thank you for taking us through those various items. I think we are now on to the risk management. Beg your pardon. We are now at, I think, Noah's information report. Is that correct? Is Noah going to join us? That's okay. So why don't we, because we have moved at a pace, why don't we see if we can get hold of Noah and move on to Graham's report? Is that okay? Let me just start. So even the elderly of us can probably carry on for a little bit more. Why don't we move on to Graham's report, which is in relation to the risk management policy. Now, I note, Graham, that this is for noting. However, the policy itself provides that the committee's got the responsibility of reviewing and recommending approval of the framework. So you want us to note this, or you want us to approve it?
At this stage, Mr. Chair, it will still need to be adopted by council.
So you don't want us to even recommend it?
Yeah, it would need to be a recommendation to council, but we may want to defer that until we've actually finished the framework as well. So we're presenting the policy of the framework to council at the same time.
Okay, so basically what you're doing here is you want us to note this and provide any comments to help you.
Yeah, I think that would be the best. That's the start.
Absolutely fine. Thank you for clarifying that. Is there anything? I've only got one question, Graham. Is there anything that you wanted to draw specifically to our attention before we move to questions?
No, I guess just a couple of things, and probably just in relation to I guess Kit's question before around David Robson not being here, and yeah, David's basically his role is more just as a risk advisor, so we go to him. We've got some issues, but just in the development of this, it's just probably just to kind of get an understanding of kind of how we got to the point of having a separate policy and a separate framework. So David had prepared a draft framework which incorporated the policy as well. It was one document, and so I then took that through our leadership team, and so my colleagues on the leadership team and I guess convinced me in the end is that we actually needed to have the two documents to be consistent with our other policies and frameworks. So Rebecca did a great job of splitting those two documents out. We then took the policy and the framework back through LT, which was a really useful exercise. And I think the good thing from my point of view is that we were all involved, and we all with some substantial changes came out of that. And so this was only just, I guess, finalised last week, and then I guess it was a situation then to go back to David and ask him to come to this committee and then report on something that we had totally destroyed. It was probably without sort of I guess front footing that. But I did contact him on Friday and sent him what we'd done, and he was actually more than happy. So in the end, he probably actually could have done it would have been fine. So at this stage, we're still working on the framework and the policies attached to this report. So we're happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Graham. So, Graham, my overarching question is really focused on the purpose. implicit in this extremely dry policy is the suggestion that risk is a bad thing. The reality is that risk is a wonderful thing because taking risk means you're trying to do stuff. And I think that what the purpose really misses is to reflect that fact that there is no reward without risk. That risk is the other side of the getting stuff done coin. And that what a smart operation does that is trying to achieve stuff is clear about the risks that are associated with trying to do things, is clear about the level of risk it's prepared to take, and then is smart about the way in which it manages those risks. At the moment, I get a strong sense from the risk management policy that risk is horrible, it's icky and it's ugly, and we have to manage it without setting it in the context of the fact that you're an organisation that is trying to do things for your community, and risk comes along for the ride. So I'd really appreciate it if in the next go round, you could perhaps add some colour to the purpose to reflect, I think, the fact that everyone inherently understands, which is we all take risks every day and we do it to get stuff done. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, they're wise words, and I'm sure we can change that that purpose to reflect that. And I guess at the end of the day, it's what our risk appetite is, what level of risk we're prepared to accept, and we can certainly put some words around that on the purpose.
If fundamentally it's a strategic enabler. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Okay. So thank you, Graham and Rebecca. If you could perhaps in the next iteration add that colour to the risk management policy, that would be great. So on that basis, I think we as a committee will simply note the draft, appreciate the effort that's gone into it, and note that the risk management framework will accompany the policy for recommendation by the committee in due course. Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask the question? Does this then come back to the all of the elected members at some stage for
Yes.
approval?
Yes, it will, Councillor Prendergast. Yes, so at some point we'll. I think like I just wanted to put something in front of this committee for them to refer to. But by the time it goes to council, we'll have the framework ready as well. And so the two documents are very closely linked. So by the time it goes to council, we'll have both ready. So they'll need to be adopted by council too.
So I was just wondering, and this may be absolutely obscure, but should we have a short workshop at one of our workshops? Like, how do we prepare everyone else for the journey that we've taken to get to the point that we get to, and then they sort of come in without all of this background discussion?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We can certainly have a short workshop and a good idea. Yeah.
Thank you.
Because presumably that workshop's going to be fundamental to elected members deciding what their appetite is for risk.
And another organisation that I've been involved with, that's an incredibly difficult hurdle. And everyone comes in with their own perceptions, etc. But to actually define it is really quite a big jump for them.
Excellent. Thanks. That's a great question, Councillor. Thank you. Okay, on that basis, we'll note that and look forward to receiving both the policy and the framework for recommendation in the future. Thanks, Graham. Noah, good morning. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks also for your information paper, where I think that one of the key elements of the paper was to talk about the actions that are being undertaken to lift the contractor SHE pre-qual completion rate. for very good reason, which is trying to level up the opportunity for smaller operators to be able to participate in tenders, as I understand it. Makes perfect sense. Is there anything, Noah, that you wanted to specifically draw out before we go to questions?
Just want to apologise for being late. I was in a meeting.
No apology required. We were moving at quite a rate.
But no, nothing else in that report.
Thanks. Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Hughes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I know, how are you? Great report, thanks. Just 4.3 around the incidents. Could you give some context about what those incidents involved? Were they with the members of the public?
Members of the public. It was just more around careless behaviour, not focusing on their surroundings. So there was nothing of overt concern. E.g., was, for example, some people walking into one of our glass doors. That was fine.
So it didn't involve anything like vehicles or anything?
No, so nothing.
I just sort of it was because it would then come under the critical risk, incident reporting. So no, that's fine. Thanks for that. 4.17 on the CPR and AED training that you've started. Is there some scope for that to be compulsory, or is it compulsory? It's not compulsory here, is it?
No, it's not compulsory. It was an optional additional training. So we have our first aiders, and it doesn't replace first aid training, to be very clear. It was just for other staff who were interested in sort of that life-saving training, because, when we speaking to St. John, they were saying that actually, I think they gave me some stats, something like 80 or 90% of people that, if you know CPR, you'll save people with that. So it's just a key skill we want to offer to staff.
Yeah, I was just curious because a lot of other organisations and private companies make these things compulsory for their staff to do. So right from the bottom to the top, and I'm just wondering if that could be incorporated here, or whether you think it would sort of fly or not.
Yes, so we could make it compulsory. The thing is, in those situations, you kind of have to be the willing person to jump in. And so if we make it compulsory and people who don't want to do it end up in that situation, they may not jump in regardless because they're fearful for whatever reason. So I don't see the benefit of making that compulsory. But
I sort of just look at it from the point of view that if a person if it's been made compulsory, that person technically should be able to perform those procedures. If they're isolated at some stage with nobody else, then if at least they attempted it, then that would look good. That would come back as a reputation for the council, say, okay, all our staff members are trained, that there was nobody else available. This person stepped in and did it. There could potentially be a scenario where one of the other staff members who hadn't been involved the way it is now, or hadn't volunteered to do this, I'm sort of going to trying to get my point across a long way around here, but why weren't they trained if in that situation? And you say, well, this wasn't compulsory, it was voluntarily done. I mean, you get into this. So I'm not going to say, the sky could fall tomorrow as well, or something like that, but I'm just a bit concerned that if everybody isn't trained in it in this organisation, then you could potentially get into a scenario there.
Yes.
You know where I'm coming from? Sorry.
Yeah, I completely understand. And so what we have done, we have identified the roles that are most likely to be in situations, e.g. where they're remote, where they're by themselves, for example, and those people have first aid training. So they're covered by that. The other roles that were generally offered would be generally around someone who has either CPR or first aid training. So that's why I get what you're saying, the reputational, they can go out, if I can say that. We also don't want to replace the medical. We don't want our staff replacing or trying to replace medical people. So I think there's a cost versus benefit there as well. And we always think sort of save life is great. But those who are most likely in those situations are already trained.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that. I just got one more around the bullying part. What was that? 4.28. Are they treated as reported and treated as incidents. So like, well, I know there's been, incidents lately because I was, over the phone, I was running, then I found out later that this has happened here as well. A person was rather forceful over the phone to members of the staff front counter here. So, I would almost, from what this guy said to me over the phone, I would almost class that as a bullying tactic. So
Yeah, so they're not built into our instance register as such, but we are keeping overview of those so they can obviously speak to their manager, and I think we have a threatening behaviour register, is what's called. Yeah, so we keep a track of that in a register if we get that threatening behaviour.
okay, and what is anything done about these things? From say if there's a repeat offender.
If we are going to start identifying repeat offenders and their behaviours getting to the point where it needs to be passed over to police, for example, we look to do that, or we'd offer our staff like EAP, which we have available, etc. If it gets to the point where this person is continuously going, we may get a manager involved to go and speak to this person, say, or send channel line to a certain individual in our organization. So, yeah,
I don't think if I was a bullier, I don't think I'd want to be bullying the front staff out here. They're pretty capable ladies out there.
so they're very good. They're very good.
Okay, thank you, Noah. Cheers.
Great questions, great answers. Thanks, Noah. Councillor Jeffries.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I only had the one, no, welcome, and hey, thank you for your report, very good report, thank you. Contract management, 4.21 clause. I'm just interested in what you consider would be, from a risk perspective, what potential liability would council face if there was an incident involving injury or death involving contractors who don't have an HWS policy? Is there any way that could fall back on us?
In terms of if we don't have a health and safety.
If the contractor doesn't have one and we employ them and then something happens, does that in any way impact on us?
It could potentially fall back on us in terms of we have to do due diligence, make sure they're safe on site. So the argument could be made that, hey, we didn't ensure that the people who are working on our sites were safe. And so we could get that sort of argument. It's not common, but we still want to protect ourselves in that way and also protect them.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there, that it's, from the size of the different contractors and so on. It is an imposition to have one of those policies.
Through you, Chair, this isn't about whether they have a health, safety and wellbeing policy. We expect all our people who work for us, contractors, consultants, no matter how big, how small, to actually demonstrate that they understand the risks and hazards when going on a job. This is about SHE pre-qual and whether we require our contractors to have SHE pre-qualification. That's my understanding.
Okay.
So SHE pre-roll goes and checks all that information for us to make
Yes.
sure they've got all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we did decide to exclude some of the small contractors and consultants because it's an onerous task, we've assessed that it's not, we would still expect them when negotiating through procurement and that sort of thing, we would still expect them to be able to produce something that says they understand the health, safety and wellbeing kind of issues around a job that they're doing.
So we would make sure that they would have an induction with us and they would follow our health and safety and they would do all that. Yeah.
Yep, I'll let answers that. No, thanks. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that there was potentially no risk back to us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Am I right to say, Noah, that what you're trying to do here is increase the pool of contractors that you can use who are already pre-qualified in terms of their approach to health and safety? Is that correct?
Not necessarily. It's just to make sure that everyone who works for us has that pre-qualification, or when necessary under the criteria that we'll develop. It can also be through increasing that pool, but I think the collective of sheep pre-qual comes from the collective of Waikato councils, and so a lot of us require that, and so we are in the essence increasing that pool. Makes sense. Is that answering your question? That's
Can you become a contractor to this council without pre-qualification?
on where we're working to with the criteria, yes. But what we're looking at is we're looking at the level of risk that contractor poses. So for example, a contractor who only comes into our office, all they need is they just need a health and safety induction or showing around our building. They don't need to do the sheep pre-qual. But if they're going out, for example, and they're going to building sites, etc., then their risk is much greater. So they need to have all their other health and safety stuff in mind. So they can still become them, but there's a level of the risk that their job's going to pose, is what we're looking at.
I guess the reason I'm asking these questions is that 4.21 is a little enigmatic. It says with many of our contractors not being pre-qual certified, we've undertaken an exercise to define our criteria for requiring them to be certified. The criteria seeks to strike a balance of ensuring we met our responsibilities and not putting up unnecessary barriers. Fine so far. We suspect that due to the small cost and additional work involved, it would unfairly disadvantage smaller organisations from being awarded contracts. There's kind of a series of non sequiturs in that paragraph.
Fair enough.
I'm struggling to comprehend it.
So absolutely. So right now we have all our contractors, we have very low percentage rate of those contractors who are sheep qualified.
Right, so that's sentence one.
Sentence one, that's
Okay.
key. Part two is that we need to make sure we've done that risk assessment on those contractors and to make sure that the appropriate ones that have got are all qualified, to make sure that they're following their health and safety duties.
So that's the first bit.
First bit.
A lot of them are not qualified.
Yep.
Then you say that you need to do a risk assessment. And then you say, and some of them need to be qualified.
Yes.
So you hire them and then you qualify them?
So the process would change in the future, and that before they come on board, that we would then make sure that they, before they start, they're pre-qualified. And that, so right now we've done it the wrong way around, and that's through doing the review. We've identified that a lot have not had that. And so that's a risk for us. So we're going to try and get them up to date. And then from therefore, they're going to need to be pre-qualified before they start with us.
Okay. And you said we suspect that due to the small cost and additional work involved, it would unfairly disadvantage smaller organisations.
So with the contractors that have to get sheep qualified, there is a cost to the sheep pre-qual.
Yes.
I think it's a few $100s. So if you're a sole contractor, a few $100s is a lot more than say if you're a multi, like if you're Downs or something like that. So that's the difference there. And then also, obviously, she qualified does all those checks. So it goes, here's your health and safety policy, what's your team, are they all trained, all of that information. And so by supplying all that information for one individual contractor, takes a proportionate much more time than say a big contractor. So we don't want to disadvantage them by over requiring them to be sheep qualified. That makes sense.
Okay.
It's a small cost, but that doesn't make sense.
It's a small cost, but
I think we've got the wrong word in there.
Just cost.
Yeah, I didn't pick it up when I reviewed it, but we're saying, I mean, if it's small cost, everyone should do it. We're saying that that's a barrier. Cost could be a barrier for some of the smaller ones. So it's not a small cost.
It's a relative cost, yeah.
Yeah, relative to the
Relative
small,
size.
yeah, to the size of the business.
Yeah.
It's just, the reason I'm struggling is that I'm struggling to see how these sentences link together. And then I'm trying to work out what your objective is and what the impact of what you're trying to do is, it sounds like the impact of what you're trying to do through pre-qualification is actually going to reduce the number of contractors that are capable of doing work for the council.
If they decide not to get SHE qualified, yes.
Okay,
That was the, I guess, in a roundabout way, that's where I was coming from, Mr. Chairman, in terms of what risk does that impose on us, if any? That was the question, but I think you probably phrased it a little better than I did.
So if you don't mind me speaking to that a little bit,
course.
is that the SHE pre-qual people who undertake that for the Waikato councils, they're very good, and I've had a conversation with them around, you know, if contractors don't have the information they need, they will work with them to try and make sure that they can get that information. So they're not just going to go, you don't have it, you're not going to get qualified. They will work with them. And that's what we signed up for.
I'm just, the reason I ask is that I'm just conscious that in a rural community, you want to encourage as many of your local businesses to be offering themselves up to do council work as possible, I'm assuming. And that you wouldn't want, for no good reason, to put up a whole range of, and I'm not saying you are, bureaucratic barriers which disadvantage smaller operators and advantage larger organisations.
Having said that, it depends on the nature of the work. So if we're having someone come in and we're procuring valuations of our buildings, that's slightly different to procuring lawn mowing services where people are running machines with blades that, to Councillor Jeffrey's point, could kill them or maim them. So I just think there's an assessment of risk there, and it may be that no matter how big, how small, how local, how national you are, if you're going to be operating machinery, you must be SHE pre-qualified, and we will help you in any way we can. But that is a bottom line for us, because the risk of you not doing that is something we would then have to bear. So I just think.
Okay, so when I think about the business objective, we're trying to manage our own risk, not anyone else's, frankly. I think we just need to be frank about that. Okay, all right. I'm sorry to badger you, Noah, but I just wanted to really understand what it is that you were trying to achieve there. Now I think I've got a better understanding, so thank you for that. Anyone else got any other questions? Okay, on that basis then, I'll move that we note and receive the report. Thanks, Noah, and that'll be seconded by His Worship. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. I think the next item is Brendan's report on the outstanding letter points from the 2023-24 annual report. Brendan, my overarching question was the executive summary
Yes.
seemed to be inconsistent with the report.
Yes.
In other words, you seem to have undercooked what you
Yeah.
actually achieved.
Yes, no, I've noticed that. Yeah, that was my bad. I updated it, but I sent an older version to Kaya to put into the agenda. And she's probably grabbed that wrong one that I've sent in.
So, the body of the report
Yes,
is what
it's correct.
is correct.
Yes,
Which indicates that you've made a lot of progress.
yes, I'd like to think so. Yeah.
So I'm good. Pleased we got that out of the way.
Yeah.
I thought you'd stuck it in there just to see whether I was actually reading it.
I should have said that. That made more sense.
So in terms of where you think you'll be when the auditors rock up for their final audit, do you think you will have completed all of the things that you want to get done?
Yes, so of the two that are still outstanding, one's the the service performance one. So as I say, we're just doing some testing on that at the moment.
Yep.
So that should be in place by the time people start filling that in early to mid-July.
Yep.
The policies overdue, so that was the fraud and corruption policy. So I mentioned there
Yes, you did.
that we're doing some additional work on that. So that I've updated that policy. It went to the leadership team for comment, and that was when Tanya brought up the good idea of potentially doing some training with staff on the importance of that policy.
Yep.
And also that then feeds into induction of the next council as well. That work, and obviously adopting that policy won't be before Deloitte comes in to do their work, but it will be before we sign off the annual report. So
Okay.
I'm confident we finish that because it'll be at the next September meeting, which will be after audit has been in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Colleagues, any questions or comments?
I just want to say thank you, Brendan, for the work that you've done on this. It's good to see that so many of those points have been pretty much covered off, or at least going to be covered off.
Yeah.
So, no, well done. And I think that, for me anyway, it certainly satisfies the concerns that I had from the management meeting last year.
Yeah, thank you for that. I will say it wasn't just me, it's all my team and the whole organisation, because not all of this is just me. Emma's team in particular ran fixed assets for assets. That's been a real help as well. And just, support from the leadership team also, obviously allowing me to do some of these changes that we have to do, because they could quite easily push back on some of these things if they wanted to. So,
Good, thank you. And Councillor Prendergast.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is really a question for you, not Brendan. So it's just an intrigue for me when you said to Brendan quite some meetings ago that if there's any points that have come from the report that you are not going to address, how do you address that with the auditor? Because they picked it up, said we think this is important, and you're going back to them and saying, well, actually, we're not going to attend.
Well, it's an integral part of the audit process, Brendan, isn't it? Forgive me if I'm kind of answering the question. You can mark my work. The auditors will come back with observations and recommendations, and there's an opportunity for management to make a comment on those recommendations. And I have consistently been of the view that auditors will always offer a counsel of perfection. But there are some circumstances where what they suggest may not be practical or reasonable in the circumstances of this organisation. And what I've urged Graham and Brendan to do is don't just sit back and say yes, because every time you say yes, my committee will be all over you saying, so when are you going to get it done? So the time to have the conversation, if it's not reasonable or not practical, is with the auditors. And even if there's a disagreement, we can have that conversation. And if Graham and Brendan are able to persuade us that in fact it is not reasonable or not practical in these circumstances, I'm more than happy to say we respect the auditor's view, but we're going to go with our senior team.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yep.
By that word conversation, kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
yes, so in those 4 that I've listed in the report that we're not addressing, that was part of the management response back. Said we won't be addressing this for whatever reason.
Thank you.
Great. Excellent question. Thank you. Okay. On that basis, then, I think that we'll receive the report. Thank you for your and your team's efforts, Brendan. Let's now move to what is always a highlight for me, the outstanding debtors report, because that's all about cash. I love cash. Teresa, welcome. So it looks as if you folks have attempted a different format this
Yes.
time, and so I'm interested, if you wouldn't mind talking us through what you've done,
Mhm.
why you've done it, and then we'll get into questions.
Okay, so I guess I'll address the why first. So there was some feedback at the last meeting, which I wasn't at actually the previous meeting. But particularly the last meeting, I believe, where this was quite the previous report was confusing in the way it was presented. So what I've attempted to do here is try and make it a bit easier to understand and show the information that you're more concerned about, which is not so much that quarter to quarter type stuff, but more just overall in general, how we're trending, all that sort of information. So I've gone through a few different councils, data reports, and got ideas as to how they've done it.
Right.
Sort of taken that,
Well
taken the best bits of each and tried to put it in here. Obviously, it's the first time doing it, so we're completely open to further suggestions of improvements or anything else you want us to disclose if we're not at the moment. I'll take any offence if you don't like what we've done either. But yes, I guess just putting that out there that, yeah, so we've attempted to address the issues that were raised and we hope we have, but.
Right, okay, no, thank you, that's a great attitude to take. So, just while colleagues are looking at their questions, if I could just ask you, I think I've got 3 questions.
Yep.
So Teresa, one of the things I love about you is that you did not come down in the last shower.
Yeah.
So why then did you agree to Waikeria prison having 60-day terms?
I'll pass it on to Richard.
I will say if that was agreed to, and I don't know if it ever was, finance was not involved in that discussion. That would have been a regulatory thing, but I have a sneaking suspicion it was just kind of imposed on us by CPB/Department of Corrections. I was never involved in any discussion about that. I don't know if any of the leadership team were involved in any discussions about that.
But the easy way, you're the consent issuer. They may ask for 60-day terms and you'll say, here's the deal. If you want a building consent, you pay like everyone else does.
Yeah, I guess the issue we ran into is that there was a lot of back and forth about paying the bills in the first place. So when the whole project started way back in 18, 19, whenever it was, there was actually a completely different agreement about how the payments were going to work. So they were going to pay us in a lump sum. We would invoice against that and then we'd charge them for the next lump sum. In the intervening years, everyone was involved in that agreement from Waikeria's point of view, and actually the staff that worked it out from our point of view as well. The building area have all left. And so that agreement kind of fell over. And then the whole payment and getting payment for consents became a bit of an issue. The regulatory team kept issuing the consents, obviously, because because it was a massive project, they kind of had to. So then the payments got behind, and so by the time we got that all sorted, a lot of the consents had already been issued, and it was just up to CCC sort of stage issuing those and bit of a hold those back. I guess in terms of why we didn't, I probably not the best one to be answering that question because I wasn't involved in any of those discussions, so I don't know what's happened outside of that. Yeah,
But that wouldn't, given that the building consenting team's under new management, that wouldn't happen again.
I would suspect not. And obviously, we know that last budget, the government announced that we're going to do further additions there. I'm assuming that's happening. I haven't actually gone through this budget to see if it is. When that project goes ahead, I'm assuming we'll have much stronger written agreements about payment terms and all this sort of stuff in place as part of that.
Okay. Because fundamentally, your ratepayers is subsidising the government, which seems a little odd.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, I just make that point gently. The second point, Teresa, is in relation to the quite large development contribution sum that's outstanding over 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised, considering my understanding about the way DCs work, is that councils usually require payments to DCs before various things are issued. So can you just explain to me?
I'm probably best answer.
Yeah.
To answer that.
Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, so these all relate to effectively one one subdivision, which is effectively major piece of work. So we're currently awaiting more information from the developer. He believes that council owes him for work that he's done as well. So he's acknowledged that he's acknowledged the developer contributions and will pay, but we just need to go through that negotiation in terms of what the final amount is owed between us and us. So we've been, but Mark may want to add to this, but we've been waiting for that information for some time.
This is 1% of your total revenue, right? So it's not insignificant.
No.
Mark, good morning.
Yeah, I suppose we've sort of been waiting for this indication of what's believed is owed by council to the developer. And until we see what that looks like, we sort of can't progress it. So the fact, I don't think the two should be balanced against each other, and it should clearly be two different things. So we were under the understanding that we were going to receive something about a month ago. We still haven't received anything. So we haven't progressed it any further apart from that. We understand there is something coming, but I will say I think that council and the developer are probably at two different ends of the spectrum of what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, but if I could just add to that too, what we have done is he's now completed stage 2 of that development, is that we've put a hold on issuing CCC until those development contributions get paid. That's issuing titles until those CCCs have been paid. So that will draw it to its head.
Okay. All right. From collection perspective, are you happy that a council's doing everything it can to collect on behalf of its workplace?
Yes, I think so. Teresa's doing a great job of getting in contact with particularly the rates and the outstanding historical issues she's dealing with.
DCs.
On DCs. Yeah, I guess that's the only one that's been outstanding for a significant amount of time. Most others are pretty good at paying pretty promptly once they're issued. Yeah, I mean, and apart from going down a debt collection route and sending it off to a debt collector, but obviously because there's other discussions happening and we do have the ability to, like you say, hold tight as well the next stages, we believe that is sufficient at this point.
Tanya, you comfortable with the position?
I think we could look at separating the two issues here, and that we perhaps should review our approach that we're taking, is probably all I'd say.
All right, let's maybe that's something at the next meeting. If you could, Teresa, if you wouldn't mind giving us a specific update on progress on that particular issue, because as I say, it's 1% of your revenue base. That's pretty important. Then probably the stupidest question, Teresa, you'll be asked today. I just was a little bit maybe it's a low bar. 4.7, the rates. Forgive me, I'm struggling to understand the difference between current penalties, current arrears penalties, arrears, and I would normally see debtors aged. What we just got here is totals. Can you just help me, Teresa, understand these titles or categories?
I'll pass that to Brendan.
One of the things I love about Teresa also is ability to delegate.
Yeah, she delegates up to.
Yeah. That's my favorite.
Yeah. So I guess What we're trying to do here is to show how much of each, so current is obviously this year's rates.
Yeah.
Arrears is previous years. What I've tried to differentiate there is how much of that amount of standing is penalties versus how much is the actual rates in the dollar. So penalties, we don't budget for penalty income as income we're required to run the council. Yep, simply rates is. So I guess that's partly why we've differentiated them. It's also, as I mentioned further down in the report, with the arrears penalties, because one of the levers we can pull, we're trying to get people to pay their debts, and it's not just arrears, it's current as well, is we do have that ability to make penalties. And so I guess part of identifying it here is that to show that we are getting that reduction in the arrears, but we haven't actually had to remit a whole heap of penalties to get that reduction, which is a good thing. Right. It means that people are just paying and we're not having to put too much sweetener on there to get them to pay.
It's possibly even worth explaining to the committee, Brenda, the difference between instalment penalties and arrears penalties. You know, so they're applied quite differently.
Yes, yeah. So instalment penalties, which are the penalties within a year, that is after the penalty date for each instalment. So we do 2 instalments a year, one in July, one in January, which is due at the end of August, the end of February. So once we hit those end of August and February, we apply a 10% penalty to that current instalment. Arrears penalties are applied on the 1st of July and 1st of January, or as close as possible as we can, to any rates outstanding from previous years. So arrears penalties are only on previous year's rates. Current penalties are on the current year's rates.
I understand. Yeah. Thank you.
So any standard debts procedure, any payments go against the oldest debt. You know, so they go against the arrears first. Yeah. So what happens is that because those arrears penalties are applied twice a year for someone that for instance is not paying any rates at all, those arrears penalties accumulate very, very quickly because when you start, you know, you're paying penalty on penalty.
Yeah. So and it's 10% every time. So if you had $1,000 owing at the start of the year, you know 1,200 and then 10. At the end of the year, if you pay nothing, so it's really 20% per annum, compounding 10%. In terms of coming back to your point about the aging,
yeah,
I guess with rates, the difference in the aging there is the only aging would be, is it due this year? Is it this year's rates or is it previous year's rates? And then we could break down the previous year into different rate years of relation.
Now I understand your different definition of your different categories. Now I understand why you don't need that. It's actually built into your categorization.
Yes.
Now, thank you. That's been really helpful. Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Jeff.
Yeah, just the one, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Clause 4.9.
Yep.
How soon after the beginning of each new financial year are your direct debits and APs adjusted? So like if there's a 10% increase in your rates, and you were paying $1,000, it suddenly becomes $1,100.
Yep.
So when you make that adjustment, I assume that you're actually saying if it was done in, say, September, that adjustment was done in September, you're making sure that the adjustment covers the 1,100 over a shorter period.
Yes.
See what I mean?
Yeah. So for direct debits, we usually do the calculation a couple of weeks after we've struck the rates. So about the time they're going out.
Yep.
Usually with do we go 10 or 20 days? At least a 10, if not a 20-day lead-in time. So we send a letter out to everyone by direct debit to say your direct debit will be going up to this amount from this date. So it's either, I think it's 20 days.
Yeah, I think it's true.
So to give them plenty of time to get used to that, obviously, and budgeting and that sort of stuff. But then that calculation is to clear the rates by, so we use 31st of May, even though 30th of June is our year end. And that's done for a couple of reasons. One is that our remission policy allows, if people are paying by automatic payments instead of by direct debit. So direct debits, we turn off penalties. We control direct debit so they don't get automatically charged penalty. If someone's paying regularly by automatic payments, our remission policy allows us to write off those penalties for them because they've paid off their rates for the year. They've just been charged penalties because we have no control over their payments. And so by setting up the 31st of May, that allows us to take that month of June to get all those write-offs done to the new year, because they can cause us issues. Because they may have been paying automatic payments, worked out exactly how much to pay it by the end of the year. So then the penalties put them over and suddenly they have arrears if we haven't done all the work to take those penalties off. So that's why we use 31st of May. So that's direct debits. As I say, automatic payments, we have no control over that. So it's up to the individuals to adjust their payments to reflect the rates increases. Having said that, we do, if we have a record of them, it's usually those within our debt management system that will record those that are paying regularly but not paying quite enough to clear their rates by the end of the year. The system will work that out. So Teresa can send out bulk letters to all those people saying, hey, thanks for paying your rates as you do. However, I can't phrasing what the letter says. You're not quite paying enough to pay it off this year. So you might, if you increase your payment to this much, then you'll be fine. Right. So we send those out probably September-ish, maybe even before. Because you obviously because you don't want to send it too early because they might have already made a change. So you want to give it a couple of months to sort of bed in those changes if they've made them. And then we send that out. So so it's relatively soon into the year. That's good. Okay, thanks for that.
We're also trying to use media more, so that we're putting notices out in the email to say, please check. We call it the yearly health check of your rates. So please check your payments to make sure. Please ring and just check what your payments are going to be. So I try to do that even during the year as I talk to customers. Because with payment arrangements, so they're saying, am I paying enough? So we're saying, well, they are going to go up next year, the rates are. That's not a maybe, that is. So, please ring in July when you get your bill and make sure you're paying enough. Because as Brendan said, we don't have any control over APs, and they get behind pretty quickly.
Great, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just need you to get your crystal ball out here a bit for this question. But okay, so it's to do with the water debtors. Do you foresee there's possibly an increase in those figures due to the fact that we've got a proposal at the moment for an increase in water charges? Town. Sorry, I should have differentiated that. That rural schemes are a whole different kettle of fish altogether. So why I say it is the proposal is basically a 12.5% increase in fixed and 16.5% increase in the consumption rate. I mean, it's not insignificant on top of one that's happened last year. So there's potential here for in town here increasing by 16.5%. So and on top of that, we'll have a rates rise next year in the 10% region. So this is making it more and more difficult. I understand this is a proposal at the stage, and this is coming to council, but I just see that this could be problematic in the future.
Yeah, so obviously that is always a potential to happen with any increases to anything, and without increases, you might have people struggling out there that need things. There's potential for an increase. I'd like to say it's crystal ball gazing. I think the increase is going to be. And I guess all it is we just Teresa keeps working with people that ring her, and we keep putting stuff out through columns to say, hey, look, yes, this has gone up, but we have a range of options of payments available. We'll take direct debits, we'll take automatic payments. If you buy direct debit again, you don't have to pay on the due date. We're happy to take payments throughout the year. So it's making the people aware that we are willing to work with you to make sure you don't get behind.
But there's no denying from a ratepayers or water users that this bites big time. So
yes.
I'm sort of just concerned that we're just increasing that that potential for debtors to
Yes.
default, and you know, it's not a good reputation
No.
for the council. It's not great either.
No.
So, and I understand the reasons behind it because I've seen what's going on behind it, but yeah, it's tough out there.
Yes, yeah, it is. And unfortunately, it's the way, particularly water, as we've talked about during workshops around the whole water reform discussion. It is the way water is going to go, is that it is just going to keep going up and it's going to get more expensive. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it. I mean, obviously in this case for the town stuff, part of what's driving that is we've now got 2 different water regulators that we now have to pay for. So there's increased levies that we never had to pay previously, like covering the increasing part of those costs. Yeah, inflation over the last few years, up to sort of the last 12 months, was crazy in the water space. So we had a massive increase in our values in various sense. Yeah, it is unfortunate, but I guess it is what we have to do.
I know because I know it's even bit in the rural side. So the White Path scheme, for example, of which I'm a member, the cubic meter rates increased 52% since 2022 and 82% on the fixed charge. I mean, you know, that's bloody increases, and that's sort of. And I, as I said before, I understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it any easier for anyone. And you know, as a elected member, you get it in the neck yourself. You know, you're on part of that scheme. It's just, yeah. So I'm not just put that out there.
Yeah. And water is very difficult, particularly when you're doing volumetric charging, because the more you put it up, particularly if people have other options, the less your consumption becomes, but then you have to put it up more to cover next year because suddenly you're making a loss. And rurals are obviously a perfect example of that because particularly around here, a lot of people have access to bowls or other sources of water, and so therefore they can suddenly drop off the scheme and you get one big user leave and suddenly everyone else is going to pay to make up that cost. That gets to a point where is it not sustainable again?
Just one positive spin I'd like to put onto that is at the stage, water does not get charge penalties, late penalties.
That is true, yeah. So while we do within our rates resolution actually give ourselves the ability to charge penalties, we haven't actually charged any penalties at this point.
I'd imagine that's probably going to change up to 2027.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay. Teresa, one last question, and that is when you think about your operation in terms of collecting, is there anything that you've got material concerns about? My sense is that things are moving pretty well. Is there anything that's particularly worrying?
No, not really. I think we've really concentrated, well, I've been concentrating on the really historic debt. It's been really interesting because probably in the last couple of months, I've had lots of inquiries from this new generation into Māori land. So we've had quite a few like arrears lands. I've got 2 at the moment that the next generation are coming through to say, we want to put our finger up to hand up, sorry, finger. Can you take that out of the minutes? Just put our hand up to take responsibility to come and pay that rates now. So I've got 2 of them at the moment, which has been very positive to see that happening. That you know, that the young ones are now coming in on there. Debt management has been really great. With Debt Management Central, we've got 233K sitting with them at the moment, and we get really good results with them. At the moment, we've got 1 rating process. It was abandoned land, but we've traced the people and they've now said sell it. So that now is to go through. We've had 1 that's been served. We're just letting that one evolve, and another one that's on a payment arrangement through rating sales. So quite often what we have to do, I do quite a bit of work in the background, trying to find these people, but then I've got to really evaluate my time that I put into that. So that's where I find when it gets difficult, I hand it over to DMC, and sometimes these people just need the next step up. they need that legal to actually do something. So we can be Mr. Nice Guy and say, oh, we'll help you out. But yeah, there's only so long that they can pull the wall down. And then, next step,
well-
buddy.
Look, I think that you're very conscious of the fact that every dollar that's outstanding and overdue is a dollar that's being subsidised by the ratepayers.
Absolutely.
So it's not the council they're letting down, it's the community they're letting down.
Yes.
So look, really appreciate your ongoing efforts. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Teresa, while we've got you?
No, I think it's just we're doing the best that we can with what we've got. But yes, I do agree, as Councillor Hughes said, about people are finding it really hard out there. When I make payment arrangements, I try to make them that they pay the arrears plus something towards the current. Otherwise, they never get ahead.
Yeah.
And that's where we sort of have that policy that if they honour that payment arrangement, that we do look at the arrears penalties. Yeah, because we've had cases where the penalties are just about, well, they're equal to the rates that they're owing.
So there's an incentive.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Anyone else got anything else? Okay. On that basis, then we'll receive and note the report. Thanks, Teresa, for your ongoing efforts. Thank you, Brendan, for today. I think we are now Kaya, at the end of our agenda, and then we'll move into workshops. So what I'll do is I'll close the meeting now. And I think what we'll do is we'll take a break for the only thing that did not receive an A grade mark in Council Mark's report, and that's the council's coffee. Thanks, everyone.